think I'm just going to continue the conversation that we've already started
Sure.
on the panel. This is an Interintellect salon, so we're also here to hear from you guys as you are to hear from us. Joel Miller, thank you so much for coming to New York City to talk to Interintellect people about your book, The Idea Machine, which is a book about books. You mentioned that you have a favorite Seinfeld joke about this. What was that? Remind me?
Well, Kramer had the brilliance of creating a coffee table book about coffee table books, and it actually functioned as a coffee table, which took it to the next level.
I think we all spent the pandemic putting our laptops on books.
Yeah.
And one idea I had for book marketing is to format books specifically to be ideal under laptops, because there's no way if you're like at every Zoom meeting, every Interintellect salon, you're always looking at the same 3 large books.
Yeah.
Eventually you will read them.
Possibly.
Or maybe they just become furniture.
I think they become furniture.
So
let me just confess. Well, actually, I'll confess this after I thank you all for coming out. I'm so grateful to see you here and to have a moment to share. But yes, furniture, because what happens is you need those same particular volumes in order to reach the particular height that you want. And they never get rid of.
I know exactly what books I use for these particular activities, and I don't know if the authors would like to know.
One of mine is it Edmund Hirsch, or Edward Hirsch, the Dictionary of Cultural Literacy? That's one of them. I have this timeline through history one. That's one of those. A biblical atlas is one of those. And there's like 4 of them like that. Yeah.
What is it for you guys? Do you know what books you put your laptops on? Any candidate?
Whatever's nearby.
Whatever's nearby.
History of Art by E.H. Gombrich.
Oh yeah, Gombrich is great. Yeah.
Thick and substantial. It doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
It's like brick there. Yeah.
Your book talks a lot about the book as a utility. And one of my favorite stories in it is how, today sometimes we lend our books to our friends and we think that being very frustrated when they don't give it back is a new problem. But you prove with, I think, from the 5th century through a story that this has been actually a long problem for people, where after a few weeks, you don't give back the papyrus and your friend is like, if you like it, you must have read it already, and if you don't like it, then why have
are
it?
you still holding on to this?
What is it with books that makes us so attached to them as objects? Let's start there. Let's start with the object permanence of the book.
So that story that you refer to, Sidonius Apollinaris was a bishop and an aristocrat that lived in Gaul, and he had a very nice library. In fact, he wrote a lot of letters, which we still have, and those letters contain all kinds of fascinating anecdotes from his life. One of them involves just how he structured and organized his life. Actually, that's not true. It's how a friend of his structured and organized a library. But about his own, like all of us, he had books that mattered to him, and he had a book kind of Jones, like a lot of us do, where you're ordering books all the time. Far fewer books in those days, but he had gotten a new book from a particular scholar, and this guy was a scholar. He writes on every topic imaginable in this one book, and his friend, I think it's Numidius, sees it, and he's like, I gotta have this book. Can I borrow it? And Sidonius says, yeah, sure. Stupidest thing anybody could ever do is offer to loan your book to somebody, because you will never get it back. And the way we know that he didn't get it back was he ends up writing him a letter several months later saying, where the heck is my book? If it wasn't very good, you would have given it back to me. If it was great and you spent all the time reading it quickly, you would have given it back to me. Why are you holding on to my book?
Yeah. I've in my life I have moved between several countries and even a continent, and moving requires moving or storing or removing your books in some ways, and we always find many books that were lent. So in America I have books lent to me several countries ago, and I have a Nietzsche, The Birth of Tragedy, that was lent to me, I think in 2006 by a friend. I remember the specific exam at university, and I feel slightly bad about this, especially because I told my friend I don't have it, and now it's in New York. It happens when my ex-boyfriend's grandmother died, who was Yugoslavian. We actually found a book that she loaned from a library in 1932, but the country where she loaned it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I say
so in
that's
Central
a free
Europe
pass
it gets
on that
weird.
one.
Yeah,
That's a free pass for that.
Fines, absolutely.
Yeah, but you write a lot about books, and I feel like you feel a little bit self-conscious about doing this thing, even though clearly you and I, we're both obsessed with books, and we shaped our careers against all odds into things where we can just like obsess over these things all day long. What were some of your favorite books about books that you go through, and how do you think that leads you in the end to basically the invention of the internet?
Okay, let me actually tell it this way. When I joined Thomas Nelson Publishers, I worked on the editorial side of an online newspaper. So I was an opinion editor, and I would basically get like 15 to 20 submissions over the course of a day, and I would like quickly put them into, like shape and publish them that night at like 1 a.m. in the morning or so. Wow. And I did that for quite a while until my boss one day said, hey, what would be amazing is if we started publishing books. That can't be that hard, right? And I said,
we're so good at these like one-pagers.
Yeah.
Like, what if they were just 400 pages?
750 words, 75,000 words, what's the difference? And I thought, that sounds amazing. I'd always wanted to be in publishing. Well, he ended up reaching out to...
Sorry, this sound is just the heating, don't worry.
He ended up reaching out to the man who not only became my boss, but actually became my father-in-law, Michael Hyatt, who was then the president of Thomas Nelson, and they formed an imprint, and I got basically tasked to go edit these books. And at some point in that process, the company that had hired me could no longer pay my salary. Thomas Nelson picked it up and then picked me up. They moved me to Nashville, and that's how I ended up in Nashville. But here's the problem. I didn't actually know how to be an editor. I mean, I went to college for a communications degree so I could become a journalist. I didn't know how to be an editor. So I started reading the memoirs of editors and publishers on how to think like an editor. People like William Jovanovich, the publisher. People like Maxwell Perkins. People like Andre Schifrin and Henry Regnery and others like that. I just wanted to see how do publishers think, how do editors think. It was an amazing education. But then I started learning about the history of publishing, because obviously in these biographies and memoirs of these people, they're talking about what the business was like. Yeah. And that was fascinating. And then that led me to the history of the book itself. And that turned out to be even more fascinating. Because all of a sudden, I'm reading about, on the one hand, maybe a gripe that Thomas Wolfe is having with Maxwell Perkins on the one hand, but then I could go all the way back to the Neo-Assyrian Empire and read about Ashurbanipal.
Pharaoh is mad at his wife.
Yeah. And read about Ashurbanipal putting out basically his wish list for his various agents as they go out literally conquering smaller kingdoms in order to steal their libraries. Like, what is going on? This is a weird and amazing tool, the book. And it occurred to me at somewhere in that process, I don't think anyone actually pauses to think about what an amazing thing this is. They're just ubiquitous. So, the idea that familiarity breeds contempt, contempt is not really utterly true. It's more accurate to say that familiarity just breeds utter neglect. We just don't even notice things. Yeah. And so I wanted to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what made books so special, and that ended up being the root of what became this book.
One of the things I love the most about the idea machine really is thinking about this object, and it's very meta, right? It's a very modernist question of having a book that is about a book, and you kind of have these like, oh my god, phenomenological relationship with it, is understanding that this is technology. And not just like, oh, how everything is a technology, conversation is technology, blah, 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 sure, but that it's, in the Aristotelian sense, it's technical. Like somebody has an intention and a goal with it, and start iterating and trying and failing until the best form arises, and then that form will evolve further on as like other technologies evolve. This is super loud, by the way. It will go away in a moment.
I kind of love it.
The first time it happened, we thought it was roadworks outside, that somebody was breaking up the pavement, but no. I live in a very old building as well, but it's not as loud as this. It's hilarious. This is how you know actually what temperature outside is in New York, because you know what temperature it automatically kicks in. And so, you know, right now, if we go and look at all the idea books, what you see is half of them are trying to make you start a startup or go into venture and, you know, disrupt, build anew. The other half cater to an audience who might be a little bit more, if not paranoid, but skeptical about what the future might bring. And you're trying to say, okay, no, it's both.
Yeah.
Right? It's like we start with somebody beating numbers into stone.
Yes.
And somehow
pressing them into clay.
That is the same timeline.
Yeah.
So how did you arrive at that kind of worldview here? Was it hard to get it published? And
well,
how?
Yes, it was.
What do you think about people who might not have arrived at the same place?
Well,
that's an overview of the publishing industry.
It's not a very intuitively obvious angle to take on the book, that it is a technology, that it has this very long lineage, and that it produces certain kinds of outcomes that are maybe not always intended by the users, but which are baked into the affordances of the technology. It is the story that I start the book with. Actually, I'll tell you two stories that I start the book with. Involved just an anecdote about Bill Gates. In I think 2017, he was asked by MIT Technology Review to look at several different developments in technology and what he thought were the cutting edge this is and that's happening right now. He mentioned AI, he mentioned sanitation, he mentioned nuclear power and all. I mean, honestly, if you know Bill Gates, it's kind of like a predictable list. And that's great. No diss on that at all. But as I was sitting there thinking about this list, I thought what would be interesting is if their time horizon was considerably longer. So it's not about new technology. If it was just all technology that was helpful for the future, if the scope was that broad, he would have to say the book itself as a technology. Because had the book not been invented, none of those other things would have been invented. That was like kind of a light bulb moment for me when I thought that out. And I got there actually by reading a completely different kind of story. I don't know if you're familiar with St. Augustine's Confessions, but there is a scene, whether you've ever read that book or not read that book, you probably know the scene, where he is in spiritual turmoil, he's totally distraught, he's staying in a villa with his friend Alypius, and he clutches a copy of St. Paul's letters and he goes out to the garden and sits down on a bench. Alypius follows him back, and Augustine is in torment. He does not want Alypius to see him crying, so he puts his book down and he gets up and he wanders over to, I think it's a fig tree, and he sits down underneath this tree. And as he's sitting underneath the tree, there's a wall to the side of him, and on the other side of this wall, he hears the a voice say, tolle lege, which is Latin for take and read. And he doesn't actually understand what's happening in that moment other than to assume maybe this is like the call and response of a child's game. But then it's like a light switch goes off in his head and he realizes, I have this book, take and read. He runs back over to the bench, he opens the book at random and lands on a passage that salves his spirit in that moment. I think most of us, when we read that story, think about basically the same thing Bill Gates thinks about when he thinks about a book. Yeah. He thinks about what is the content inside this thing telling me that I can find that's valuable, that's useful, that's interesting. And Augustine's not saying that exactly, but that's the use that he's referring to. But there's another use that happens right after that is like so stupid you don't even notice it. Somebody else had to point it out to me. But the minute they did, I was like, oh, that's like the whole thing that I'm trying to capture. He says, I put my finger or some other marker in it, and then I went and I showed my friend Alypius, and I was like, wait a minute. the thing itself and the thinginess of the thing enabled him to do something that you couldn't do with other book technology at that time. If he had a scroll, he would have opened it up to that spot. He would have closed it on that spot. He would not have necessarily been able to access it again. This enabled like random access to a particular piece of content, if you want to use the worst kind of word you could ever use to describe ideas, to a particular piece of content, and it enabled him to essentially fix the finding so that it could be shared with somebody else. And then if you just like follow that progression out, you could fill the book with markers. You could then have other markers and other books, and between all of those books, you could create a lattice work of new ideas that you were able to build whole theories on. And of course, that is in fact what Augustine did. If you look much later in his life, he goes ahead and he writes a book like The City of God, which is a gargantuan book for its time, and did something that no other book in his day had done yet. All because he had access to a very large library that he was actually able to build his own theories and ideas out of. And so what this tells me is that, frankly, our entire range of cultural evolution really comes down in one way or another to the interplay between the hardware of the book, the software of the book, and what we do with that interplay. Yeah.
I mean, it's quite a cliche to say that the Abrahamic world comes into existence with the logos, with the word, right? Like we come from a civilization based on a religion where we believe that a word started creation. In technology, there's this concept of viewing the human body, the human mind, always through the prism of what the latest great invention is. During the Second Industrial Revolution, people started looking at human bodies and minds as a machine, because, the steam engine had been invented. Then the factory model entered, how we think about education and work. Today we look at ourselves as a computer, we talk about the brain as such. And so I'm so curious whether, having just invented literacy, people started seeing the world as written, right? Or creation to be that of an author. But it also puts the book into this interesting kind of desecularized position whereby we understand that this used to be something sacred, and then we kind of disenchanted it. And you do talk about religion a little bit. Is that something that you think readers should bear in mind? I see books as sacred. If somebody hurt my books, I would be pretty angry.
I don't get into this in the book, this one particular kind of anecdote, but when I do have a chapter on science, and science is actually impossible without writing, because there's a kind of precision that is only available when you're actually able to iteratively work on an idea by stating a thing and then looking at it, it's staring back at you, and you get to refine it, you get to build it, you get to think of considerations that you have, park them over here, go work on something else, still come back to it and refresh your memory on exactly where you were, the whole thing. Like, the scientific process actually doesn't work without writing. Also, you can't share it, because if I turn around and let's say I develop brilliantly some idea, I wouldn't be able to actually communicate it to you in any way that you would be able to recognize or remember outside of the gist of what I said. And the gist is not enough when you're talking about formulae, when you're talking about precise, intricate descriptions of how something works or so on. So science...
Engineers here immediately think about their documentation process and how much they love it, right?
It's insane, right?
Yeah.
Okay. However, there's another side of science that we sometimes forget, and it has a very fascinating, bookish, underlining thing to it. In the Hebrew Bible, there are references to God opening up heaven like a scroll and rolling it up like a scroll. And there's also a reference, I don't remember where this is, it might be in Jeremiah, where he says something about unrolling it like a cloak. And what you get there is the tool now, not a codex, which is what this format of the book is called, but a rolled thing. You can imagine a poet sitting on earth, seeing the sky unravel in a way and like writing about, and the cloak is the same as the scroll in like the dynamic of how it works. But let's say you then, as a poet, you think about, is there a bookishness to nature? Like you just said that the sky opened up like a scroll. Does that mean it's also intelligible? Like, because poetry pushes us into considering things in new ways. There's like, the minute you put one idea next to another idea, you possibly open up a new avenue of understanding. Yeah. And so the poet is saying it unrolls like a scroll, but does that also mean it's legible? And that actually springs out into Western culture considerably later in all kinds of fascinating ways that, you know, like Galileo.
Yeah, you're right.
That guy, thank you. Galileo Galilei, is that it? Thank you.
Galileo.
No, Galilee.
But we're on first name
Flip
basis,
that.
so.
Yeah, he goes
Tomato.
I appreciate the grace on that. In the two world systems, he's talking about the book of nature. And the assumption is that the book of nature is revealing things to us, that it is intelligible, that it is rational and reasonable the same way a book is. And so in that instance, the metaphor of the book actually becomes a useful way of thinking about nature itself. Because we're bringing the assumptions we have.
Things, right?
Yeah,
so like,
the thing that we have with the book, like, this is a comprehensible, understandable, apprehendable thing. I'm now applying it to the natural world, those same assumptions to the natural world, and that drives my confidence that I will find truths about it if I simply, you know, jam my nose into it and read.
I mean, the humanity developing the self-confidence and the audacity to see the world as intelligible, I think is really, really, really important. And what is a bigger testament to that than writing it down and saying, whatever I have come up with might be interesting to other people.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about committing a great act of exhibitionism. Like, look at me. Like, I thought that one of my favorite books as a teenager was Asimov's The Tragedy of the Moon, which is a sequence of extremely exciting science essays. It's really exciting. Like, he's a chemist, but he's obsessed with things. And you're reading it, you know, like there's like an essay about chemistry, and you're like, oh my God, and what is carbon going to do next? And you're like reading it like crazy. What is it going to bind with? It's so exciting. And the whole Tragedy of the Moon, in his understanding, comes from the fact that humans have 10 fingers, so like the digital system is there, but that the moon cycles are not fully divisible by 10. And so there is this person sitting in front of their cave in Asimov's telling and going like, wait a minute, and starting to think about it and starting to have this kind of audacity to think, I'm going to figure this out. You guys shut up. Here's a stick, we can work this out. And like just having that, going from kind of childlike acceptance of everything is fine as it is, let's just like move into the Tao, to, you know what, maybe the book is trying to tell us something, and we're jerks if we're not trying, because it wants to be read. And that's a completely different kind of model of the self and how we relate to things, right? It's
what I love about what you just said is, like, we don't often think about the fact that everything started, like if it's around, it started at some point.
Yeah.
And there had to be a certain, you know, like conglomeration of features that made that thing happen. And once it's happened, you maybe, if you're lucky, you get access to it again. But like, somebody had to sit down and literally, who knows who this was, you know? But she sat down, looked up at the moon, and in puzzlement, began curiously to go work this out.
Yeah.
That is also true for the history of the book, that somebody had to, for instance, and in this case it would have been some Sumerian trader or whoever, realize
somebody owed somebody some money.
Owed somebody some money. There's too much to keep track of. Like the culture that they're in has developed to a greater extent than, you know, counting on the back of my hand or whatever can work. And so they're going to make tally marks in wet clay. And then eventually that turns into writing. It's sad, by the way, that poets don't get the credit for creating writing. Accountants do. They, you know, are probably thrilled to find this out, even if they don't know.
According to Geoffrey Miller, it was just to hit on women. So they
Yeah.
were like, I will carve this nice poem for her. And
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Somebody did that, and then that enabled all of this to begin developing. Because what ends up happening with technologies is they serve a certain purpose, but they have other affordances that are discovered as people use them. And so what ends up happening is they keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with that technology and opening up new paths of people's awareness of, well, like, for instance, if it can do this, that's great, but I really need this thing to do this other thing. And this version of it can't do that, but this other thing could do this. So, for instance, you end up going from those clay tablets to papyrus scrolls to the parchment codex. There's a logical sequence between those things, and there's a lot of overlap between those things, but there's a logical sequence between those things where ultimately we get to maybe the greatest single example of the format of the book, which is, in 1992, it would have been the 1095 trade paperback.
Yeah.
It can hold several 100,000 words. It can fit in your backpack. You can beat the crap out of it, and it's still going to be fine. Like, we went from one thing to another thing, and there's a trend line that holds it all together.
The Kyla Scanlon would call this the fuck around and find out, and they did until we ended up with the how I Made It on Wall Street back pocket book. Another thing that in your telling comes to life through words and books is the United States of America.
Yeah.
Right. You use this example, which I love, which literally starts with a code of conduct, like the Bible. Like, we'll do this thing. Maybe we'll add a few more things later. What can go wrong?
Right.
Right. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about the history of the United States as a book?
Yes. First, let me just preface this by saying, as I was working on this book, I had this one basic assumption, which is that I am tickled pink by these stories. And other people, I'm pretty sure, will also be tickled pink by these stories. If I can just find, like, the right illustrations to tell you how something worked, such that even if you didn't give a shit about how that thing happened, the story itself would be amusing enough or intriguing enough or whatever that you would just not be able to not be entranced. I found one of those stories when I read the exchanges between James Madison and Thomas Jefferson trying to describe Jefferson's book buying trip to Paris. It's impossible to understand what kind of a book nut Thomas Jefferson was, but he was ludicrous about books. He began collecting them when he was young. He never stopped until the day he was dead. Along that process, he borrowed so much money to buy books from many different people. In fact, when you read Thomas Kidd wrote a really wonderful biography of Jefferson a few years ago, and he actually follows the debt. And it's amusing, like, he's constantly paying off one debtor by just shifting it to another creditor so that he can, go do something like buy more wine, buy more books, buy more wine. He's like just moving.
It's hilarious because books came to exist because somebody noted down the debt of their Assyrian neighbor.
Yeah.
And now you go into debt because of them.
So,
a little while later.
Jefferson and Madison really first met. Their friendship was a friendship of books. They met early on as Madison was being asked to put together a list of books for the Library of Congress. They were currently at that point living in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. And it turned out that they did not need this library because Benjamin Franklin had a very significant library at a bookstore from which people could just Congress could go get any of the books that they needed. Now, the reason this matters is to legislate, you actually need to have access to a lot of political theory. And they didn't have it in their own personal libraries. They needed to go find it someplace else. And so they would go to Benjamin Franklin's library. They would find this or that book of, like a treatise or a history of this or whatever, like the various republics of Belgium and, how they came and fell and all that kind of stuff. legal theory, scientific inquiry, all of these things needed to be accessible to Congress people so that they could legislate and debate all the various things that they needed to debate. They had that in Benjamin Franklin's library.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, they're going to move to D.C., and it's literally in the middle of a swamp. There are no bookstores nearby.
Still the case, sorry.
Right. There's no Amazon. The only way you're going to do this is if you build it yourself. I'm going to come back to that in just a second about what they ended up doing. But Jefferson came upon Madison as Madison was being tasked to write up this list, everything that should go in that library.
Yeah.
And their bookishness became the thing that like actually united them as friends. Almost more than anything else. They did happen to be...
Story of Interintellect.
Exactly.
People are constantly like, oh, that's my favorite book too. Best friends forever.
They did have a lot of very similar assumptions about the way the world worked. Some of that was from the fact that they were reading the same books. They were both acculturated the same way. They were both Virginians. They both had all of these basic assumptions about things. But as happens with a friendship, their differences began to work both for them and against them in funny ways. And here's one that matters ultimately for the U.S. Constitution. Thomas Jefferson is asked to go be the United States representative in Paris. How fun would that be? If you're Jefferson, you're a very worldly man, it's going to be like the most fun you could possibly have. Off he goes. But he basically says to Madison, I got you. They're going to have amazing books in Paris, and I will be on the lookout to buy you whatever you want. So just give me a list. I'll do this. Again, this is a time when there is no Amazon. There is no like place where you could simply go like an emporium and just buy whatever you want. You had to hunt down every single book that you wanted. Yeah. And Jefferson was basically saying, I'm going to literally go to the greatest place on the planet to do this, and I'm going to do it for you. How great is this?
Yeah.
Also, I owe you a lot of money, so it's the least I could do. And so he does. And there is this amazing exchange of letters between Madison and Jefferson that I detail in the book. But I mean, you could literally just go to Founders Online and read these exchanges yourself, where they are Jefferson's saying like, hey, I found you X, Y, and Z. It's great. It's in a cheap edition. You're going to love it. And Madison's like, amazing. Can you also look out for this other thing? And he gets the letter, and Jefferson's like, yes. And I found this whole set of this other thing. And then it goes back to Madison, and Madison's like, yeah, but when are you going to send them? And it just goes back and forth. Like, when am I going to get my freaking books? Yeah. And finally, Jefferson puts all these books in 2 trunks and puts them on a ship, and they go across the Atlantic, and Madison ends up with these books. That could be the end of the story. It would still be a great story, but it gets even better. Because what ends up happening is Madison cracks open these 2 crates, these 2 huge trunks of books as the Constitutional Convention is going on. And he starts pulling out these books one at a time, and it's like the history of, these various republics, the legal theory of this person or that person. And he starts writing, he reads through these, he's riffling through these books, keeping notes the entire time, and he comes up with essentially a 40-page brief on how to conduct a government based on these histories.
How to build a country.
How to build a country.
The Medium article on like 5 steps to build a very big country where you don't have all the territory yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, easy peasy.
Easy.
Washington, Jefferson's still in Paris, but Washington reads this and he's like, I need a copy of that. That would be helpful. He cribs Madison's copy and he leaves out the Latin because he doesn't read it. So, but he cribs that copy. That becomes George Washington's personal operator's manual on the United States Constitution. And Madison essentially, through reading those books that Jefferson gave him, which he paid for with his own money, which Madison paid for indirectly with his own money, because he loaned the money. He created, almost out of whole cloth, but not, because he was actually using these intellectual resources that he suddenly had access to, the shape of the United States Constitution. Yeah. And this was known by the people in the room who said things like, this is the best read guy around. Nobody understands the in and outs of these debates like Madison. And of course, all of that was happening because Madison had a better library than they did. And this same thing happened with Jefferson later on. Jefferson got into a tiff with Alexander Hamilton over some treaties the United States had with France. Jefferson was very partial to France, obviously. Hamilton wanted to break these treaties. And he had pulled out some quote from a scholar named Vattel who could justify breaking this treaty. But Jefferson knew this would be a problem. Like, this will bite us in the ass if we do this. And so he doesn't want to. He has every reason to think this is a bad idea, but he doesn't have a way to convince Washington that this would be bad, because Washington wants to break these treaties based on what he's hearing from Hamilton. And so Jefferson is like a very shrewd guy. Jefferson says, all right, well, and he's writing Madison this. So we know this is happening because he's writing Madison. And then we can kind of put this up against pieces of his own notes where you can literally see this thought process breaking down, happening in his own head. He says to Madison, this whole case is built up on this one scrap of Vattel that Hamilton misunderstands. And so he goes to the same book, which he has in his own collection, and he disproves the way
how to be interpreted.
Exactly, the way Hamilton is interpreting it. And then he also picks all these other authorities that he knows Hamilton likes, and he pulls all their quotes out, and he begins to assemble a brief that basically says, this would be ruinous if we did this, and I'm going to use your own authorities to prove it to you. And then he Then he goes and he gives this to Washington, and it's like Trump, he wins. By that, I mean Trump, lowercase t, like Trump card, he wins.
Yeah.
So the book is actually full of these like use cases, historical use cases of how books have been used to help just kind of paint the picture of what is this thing, how does it get used, and what is it useful for?
And obviously, I spent so much of my teenage years reading about the history of technology, history of books, history of literature, science, and this is so full of new stories that I had no idea about. And every 2 pages, you basically introduce a new, extremely interesting and very kind of familiar story about how people were really messing around and figuring things out as they went. And what a great effect of even the smaller, innovations would cause. But you're also quite frank about some of the dangers of publishing books. Like you say that book banning doesn't work, etc., but you do spend considerable time talking about free speech, the fact that putting something down on the page is dangerous.
Can be.
It can be. There is a you need to write it down to participate in the idea dissemination and cross-dissemination and this whole process. But the moment it's written down, there's also a finality to it. It's irreversible, especially if somebody knows that it was you, if you put your name on it. And, luckily we tend to live in eras where it's more or less safe to do so. At least your life might not be in danger, although we're just past a couple of assassinations and attempted assassinations. So sadly, there are cases even in the West where you would be targeted for what you have said or written. But in your view, how should somebody in 2025, 2026 relate to this aspect of the book? And do we have to, I sometimes wonder about this when I read novels, sometimes just that, oh my God, what it took for this person and their families, their economic situation, to produce this. But it's also a political act. It's also often an act of rebellion. I mean, this person thinks that they have something new to say, which implies that everything beforehand was wrong.
Right, like there's an arrogance.
There's an a kind of disrespect in an adolescent way of trying to write it. So how should we think about this more dangerous aspect of books? That you produce something and I mean, we don't know, but maybe somebody will be super mad at you for something that happened here, and they will be like, Joel Miller.
Yeah.
Of course, he used to be in publishing. You can tell by whatever. Like, we don't know, right?
If there were just a lot of those people and they were all hitting Twitter at the same time, and that would trigger book sales, I would be great with it. Totally
I think it's Goodreads they go these days.
that's
no,
probably
that's where they cancel you.
flame people on.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, there is a funny thing about books, which is that because they are like the ideas that come out of somebody's head, they're refined, the whole thing, they're put down on some kind of stratum, paper or parchment or whatever. It's consultable, that's like the whole point, but that means it's also can be used in evidence against you.
Yeah.
And that goes back actually a very long way. I don't remember the exact...
And you don't know who's going to find it, right? Like you have zero, like you have no control over what happens to your text.
Well, and so Socrates...
Yeah.
Like
It ended so well for him, by the way. It's a great example.
Yeah. Well, and he's kind of like a little bit of a whipping boy in the book because he's famous for not liking books. And I think actually the way those stories get told misunderstand Socrates, and they actually demonstrate something very hypocritical about Socrates, which is that he was dependent on books and used them quite a lot. But the point being that Socrates, in his complaint about books, said that very thing, that a book is not a discriminator against who reads it. It can't like say, I'm not going to reveal my secrets to the wrong person. It just says what it's going to say to everybody. And because of that, somebody who might not appreciate that message can find it and then use it against you. And there are stories, even in ancient Greece, of that happening. And of course it persists. And powerful people have always used the control of ritual and knowledge and things like that in order to bend situations to what they want. And I tell the story early on in the rise of the Christian church, there was a period where like nobody in the Roman Empire was paying attention to what the Christians were reading. They didn't care. By the time you get to Diocletian, now it becomes an issue because the way Christians got persecuted because they basically would not do the Roman oblations to appease the gods, which guaranteed that the gods would, shine favorably upon them and protect them. Christians, outside of literally everybody but the Jews, so the Jews got like a special dispensation. There were an ethnic group that was separate, and the Romans recognized we're not going to screw with them, we're just going to leave it as is. So you guys don't have to do this. But the Christians were not just ethnically Jews in some cases, now they were also Gentiles. So that sect of Judaism that produced Christianity is now just a random group of people. And the Roman...
It spread super fast.
And it started to spread quickly.
Right? Because now we're in the...
It started to spread quickly, and the Roman government looks at this and says, okay, now we have random people who are refusing to do obeisance to the gods because they claim that they worship this other god, and that's a problem for us. And so as they began to experience the difficulty of, on the one hand, the Christian population growing quickly, and now all of a sudden what is essentially mass sedition, they have to crack down. And Diocletian is one of the first to issue a edict that says specifically that their books will be taken too. And so there is a moment that I capture in the book where all of these persecutions happened like somewhat intermittently. They were random. But when they happened, they could be brutal. And in this one instance, there was a church. They sent a bunch of soldiers to go to this church and seize all these books. And there weren't any there at first. The various people in the church began to like find one or two, but because they had been trying to hide them. But they said basically the readers have them. And the readers, like a reader in the ancient church was like literally an office. Your whole job was like to do nothing but like read the book to the people who are out there, and that was like a thing that you did. And so the readers like had taken those books home with them. And so they basically sent out these various soldiers to go round up all the readers. They got their names. It starts to feel literally like something you see in a movie about Nazi Germany.
Yeah, that's going to Gestapo.
It feels like the Gestapo going and like rounding people up, rounding up their literature, seizing anything that might be verboten. And this became later a controversy in the Christian church because you had certain Christians that gave up their stuff to the Roman government, that gave away their books, and then others that didn't. And the ones that didn't faced persecution for it, and they held it against the ones that did, because they're like, you got off easy. We're the ones that suffered, so you guys could get off easy. And it was later was called the Donatist controversy, and it was like, it went on for decades and decades.
That's interesting. I never thought that they basically invented the samizdat, and in early Christianity you even have the ichthys, the symbol of the fish that is also an abbreviation of Christ's name in Greek, right? And so there is even an invention of a letter as a code because you can't use the existing letters. Right. So like trying to you invent the technology for disseminating information, and then you try to curtail it to wait.
This goes back literally to the very origin of writing.
Yes.
I tell a story in the book about the origin of writing, how merchants and traders used writing. Yeah. And then I tell immediately after like this thing coming how people were instantly using it to subvert the authorities. So in the Neo-Assyrian Empire, they're trading up in Anatolia, and they are basically sending big piles of tin up north. And of course, they're going to have to pay a duty on this. They're going to pay tariffs, essentially, on these goods. And so they're writing letters literally to their trading partners up north so that they can say things like this, and this is nearly an exact verbatim quote, like, the tin, or take the tin out of the bundle and we'll smuggle it in the camelman's underwear. Because what they're doing is they're basically saying, we'll just divvy up the load amongst people, and if they don't like chink and rattle too much as they walk through the line, we won't have to pay taxes on all this stuff. And they were coordinating that with writing, because that was the only way to do it. But writing allows uses that are both sanctioned and unsanctioned. And that's getting to your ultimate point about the fact that writing can be used for rebellious purposes. Yeah. And then, of course, there are consequences for bucking authority. And so there's this tension throughout the history of the book, in fact, about how does authority handle the fact that writing can be used for unapproved purposes.
But also, like, you invent something for administrative purposes, like the letter, right? And then cut to a couple of thousands of years later, it's used as the epistles for conversion.
True.
Right? I always joke that St. Paul invented email marketing. Like, he was so good at it. He would just send a letter to you, and now you think that, you need to love thy neighbor.
St. Paul also did something else funny.
Sales.
He reamed people out in those letters.
And he was super aggressive. Like, those letters are really like, shame on you guys. And they were like reading it up, like, oh my God, shame on us. Okay, we will end with shame, because I think it's super funny how, I mentioned earlier that in your book, you do not seem like a doomer to me. Yeah. You actually understand that technology is good, and it started with these parchments, and now, we are hopefully becoming an intergalactic species. But like, one of my favorite lines in the whole book is that Sam Bankman-Fried should have read a book. So you do have a nuanced opinion about these things. Do you want to talk about SBF a little bit, and why you devote so much time to him and his favorite? Because I'm mad at Marie Kondo because she thinks that you should like burn your books if you have more than 30, and so I think that she is the Antichrist. Yeah. But you bring up another celebrity. Yeah. For similar reasons, though.
Sam Bankman-Fried kind of inadvertently became the negative poster boy for a humanities degree. Does
he have a humanities degree?
No, just like...
Okay.
He spent too much time at math. Like, he would have done better had he read some Jane Austen.
Many such cases.
Yes. So Sam Bankman-Fried spoke with a journalist who was writing a profile for Sequoia Capital, and it was on their website. It's off their website now, but Thank God, like, what is it? The archive page. And what's that?
The Wayback Machine?
Yes, the Wayback Machine. You can find this beautiful exchange in which he says to this journalist, who is a New York Times reporter and actually wrote part of this up for the New York Times also. But he said basically, if you wrote a book, you fucked up. Like, writing a book is a total waste of time. If you wrote a book, that could have been, like a 6-paragraph blog article. And he said, I don't think, and this is nearly a quote, he said, I don't think that reading a book is always bad, but I do think something very close to that. And this profile got run about him, by him, like weeks before FTX exploded. And of course, like thoughtful people, observant people said, could there be a connection between how flippant you are about the humane resources of the human species and how to treat others and how to elevate your own sense of ethical purpose, et cetera, et cetera? Could there be any connection between that and what just happened to you? And so the New York Times ran a really great piece basically saying it probably would have been a good idea if Sam Bankman-Fried had read a couple of novels.
Yeah.
Like, in a novel, in a great novel, the characters change. And in a really great novel, the readers change too. And that did not happen for Sam Bankman-Fried because he was too busy reading 6-paragraph blog articles.
Yeah. So to me, it seems like your book, let's leave many questions open, but it doesn't seem pessimistic to me at all. Like, books will survive, and why we create books and why we crave books, that desire is not going anywhere.
Right.
And so I would love for you to just say a few things about that and whether you have updated anything about that since finishing the book. Obviously, it takes a while for it to get published. And, if you could pass on some message to the technologists before we open for questions from the attendees, what would that be? Would it be just go and read Jane Austen?
That's a great start. And Steinbeck and Hemingway and whoever else.
Yeah.
Shusaku Endo. I mean, there's so many great novelists. However, forget about novels for a minute. Just think about this, I think. Humans create tools for humane ends. We lack things. Our arms only reach so long. They're only so strong. Our minds can only imagine so much. There are limitations to being a human. And some of those limitations are perhaps never to be bridged. Maybe we'll never get past some of those. But we have been getting past some of our limitations since the very beginning. Somebody figured out that if you apply this, rapidly combusting thing called fire with this thing called food, I can get way more nutrients out of this thing. And so I'm just going to
And grilled cheese sandwiches.
And that too. Yeah. Turns out that's a greater innovation. But if I've got these raw pulses and beans that are difficult for my body to digest, but if I can cook them, I'm going to get more out of them. Well, that is what humans have been doing literally since we figured out how to do anything. Yeah. To make things that help us surpass our limitations is a native human function. That is one of the things that we do. This entire city that is around us is a testament to the fact that humans have been doing this a long time and doing it at a very high level. And I think at the moment there is an attitude among people that somehow or another we have reached too far, that we are trying to exceed our limits too far, too much. And I think that is a very arbitrary decision that comes out of a place of anxiety and fear, which I can't speak to somebody else's anxiety and fear.
Yeah.
But I do know that we are often fearful and anxious about things that we shouldn't be and that we need not be. And so while I can't speak to their fear in particular, in general I know that's true. And I also know that there are millions of examples, and many of them from the very history of the book, that would say that the tools that we're developing can be used for healthy, humane ends. And the way to do it is actually to lean into those ends, not to try to stop the thing from being developed at all. You won't win anyway. So you might as well try to figure out how to use it well. Just like Sam Bankman-Fried probably just should have gone ahead and read the book that he was trying to avoid reading. It would have gone better for him.
Maybe a little Dostoevsky would have done him good.
Something, yeah, Dostoevsky would have been
a little
good.
bit of a Dostoevsky. One book is already too much.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit. Any questions, guys? We are going to open so that Joel can also talk to you. I know a lot of great readers here. Don't be shy.
Firstly, I just have to get it out of my system when we started this talk.
Jay,
we
go
talked
ahead.
about Sumerians
Yes.
coming up with this idea of writing.
Yes.
And this story just stuck in my head, just like it out. Like I've just been imagining this guy like, you owe me so much, not even money, maybe let's just say shit. You owe me so much shit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write it down. And the other guy like, what is writing?
Yeah.
Then he just like came up with the idea of like printing these things on the clay.
It's literally like 7 like wheat
clay.
symbols crossed out.
Yeah,
like
this
that's the first.
symbolizes like how much ships you owe me.
Like this is
And
mine. Yeah.
The other guy probably thought like, hold on, I can use this for flirting now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's just so crazy. Okay.
What I
So-
find amazing about that, by the way, is like we have, vast, complicated contracts today.
Yeah.
They all got started because somebody did what you just described,
Yeah.
and then got the other person to agree that, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
That's that's amazing that ever happened.
Yeah.
And yet it did, and now it's so commonplace we never think about it.
I mean, the signature itself is just that we both have seen the same paper.
Yeah.
Or the same writing, right? You sign it, I sign it, we both have seen it, and we agree that this is reality.
Yeah.
That's what signing something is.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Somebody
sign that you
invented
both
that
have-
process.
Read it. It's crazy, yeah.
The best case, that's just a piece of clay.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's just idea that we just happen to share.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it feels so much better getting
This is like group therapy. I actually hosted a couple of group therapy events on Interintellect where, maybe you should do it in New York as well, where you just like talk about your life and who you are and what happened to you in your life, and then the other participants all put together a list of 10 recommendations just for you. And so everybody leaves with this like personalized list. So we will do that now spontaneously. Everybody's welcome to bring whatever you feel like you need to share about reading. This is a safe space. This is not going to be on the video.
session.
Whatever is off your, you can get it off your chest, yeah.
I mean, just to riff off the personalized
Yeah.
thing, like it's something I think a lot about,
Yeah.
right? Like a book is one thing, right? It's one way, and that's kind of what gives it authority and validity and all of those things. But kind of the other side of the coin is it cannot be personalized to you, or it could not be up to this point. But I'm thinking, like with AI and all of those things, there could be a potential for technologies that kind of like adapt it a little bit to people. Like, people are doing like, explain it to me as I'm a 5-year-old or
Right.
other stuff.
Oh, that's
right?
interesting.
That's actually.
But
what's
even
going to-
novels, like, it's Jane Austen, but like, I like blondes, and now she's blonde.
Maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
or maybe someone's like, like here's this book and it's interesting to me, but I actually want to only find out about like these type of stories or something. Where can I find on which pages? Or
Okay.
like, there's so many different ways this could work, and I'm just.
I mean,
curious
those
if
are-
you have
Those uses are happening now.
Yeah.
Like for instance, as an example, Project Gutenberg has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of free ebooks.
Yeah.
And Notebook LM is one bitchin' tool. And you can grab those ebooks, you can drop them into Notebook LM, and you can query them. And you can have it do things like build me, like a list of all the relationships between this book that I've dropped in and this other book that I've dropped in. And it will find things that you yourself do not have time for, do not have the scope for, do not have the insight for.
Yeah.
And that's potentially really amazing,
Yeah.
potentially really great. I do think there's an interesting moat that books have that AI will not be able to cross. Now, that doesn't mean that a version of the technology of the book may not be able to cross it, depending on what people want out of it. Because this moat that I'm describing is very specifically about the way some of us engage with some books some of the time. So it's about as qualified as you can get. but I think it's incredibly meaningful. The same kind of person that goes and prefers to watch YouTube or Netflix over reading a novel, over reading a history, over reading a memoir, will love a version of the book that can be hyper customized to their consumption. However, that is not the only user of the book. There are lots of us, I would venture to say it's probably most of us in this room, and obviously hundreds of thousands. It'll always be a marginal group. But the reason we go to the book is actually the role of the author with a particular statement that invites us into an immersive experience of that statement.
Yeah.
So,
and the point is that you want to spend time there.
Yes.
Right? Like Hilary Mantel always talks about the fact that her books are worlds. Like she wants you to move into that space.
And you don't want
to leave.
You don't want your spin on that space. You actually want her spin on that space.
It's like being a guest somewhere. Like, I don't want to clean up. Like, feed me. Yeah.
If I go to Thomas Keller's restaurant, the last thing in the world I would ever want to do is go into the kitchen and ask him to do it this way or that way because I like doing it.
Like, surprise me.
Yeah.
Like, I want
you bring me what you think is great.
Yeah, exactly.
You bring me what you think is great. That's what I'm here for. And that's what we do with our authors. We go to Shusaku Endo because he is going to give me a taste of the world that I cannot access. I do not have that.
I mean, when you read a book and there's this feeling when you don't want it to end, like there are books that I read, like I don't know, I stay up for 3 days, I just read like the whole 1,000-page book and then I read the last 20 pages for a month. Yeah. Because I'm like, I don't want a guy to die.
Totally.
I don't want this to end. I feel great there.
You go back to it. I just read Alessandro Manzoni's The Betrothed in the new translation, which is, honestly, it's like one of the best novels I have ever read in my life. I just read it like 6 months ago. I am dying to read it again.
And then you have to wait a little bit. It's terrible.
But like, I want to read it again. I want to go back into that experience.
And the point is that it's long. Like
it is. It's immersive.
Andy Matuszak wrote like why books don't work and that it's not an ideal way of passing information. Like, yeah, but I don't know. If you have a child, you kind of enjoy as it grows.
Yes.
You're not like, hey, be 40. You're like, oh, I don't want this cute phase to end.
Right.
The whole point is that
if it were just passing on particular pieces of information, not engendering an experience within you. If it were literally just about passing on information, we could just get summaries and Sam Bankman-Fried would be right.
But in a great novel, the information is you, the reader. Yes. There's no other information. You get to spend time with yourself in a different way.
The book is basically recruiting your emotions, your psychological makeup.
And it's as customized as it can get. Like a great novel is always customized.
Yes, because you are the only you that can engage with that. And you are it's an inanimate thing. You are what animates it.
It's going to hear you.
You are what animates it. And that's an amazing thing. Yes. Sorry.
We're fine. We're not crazy at all about books.
Kind of like more specific to like print publishing, not just like books specifically, but like, I don't know, in the world of like internet, collapse the cost to publish writing on online to basically zero. AI is removing like even more friction to content online. Like in a world of like a lot of synthetic content digitally. Does it feel like, I don't know, there's a case for if you're writing anything serious, you're printing it? Like is there like an outlook for what does like print look like in a world of like a lot of synthetic AI digital content?
Works in Progress. Do you know that publication? They just announced their print magazine.
Oh, it's gorgeous as well.
Online stuff, and I've been online since probably 96. I started my very first web magazine in 97. It was garbage, so don't worry about it.
But you could find it on Alta Vista?
It's probably, yes.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Yep. You would go to yahoo.com in order to find it. And what was the other one? It was a handful of them. But there is an impermanence to digital archives. There's just like, even stuff that literally was published 2 years ago may have broken links because the site got overhauled. and the I don't even know the right terms anymore, but the database structure is different, and so the URL that is printed in the back of the book that you got, or that is linked on a website that you got, no longer maps to whatever is on that site.
All those fofos.
What's that?
All those fofos.
Yes, exactly.
And I was there when some of the authors in the Works in Progress magazine first saw themselves, like at the Progress conference. Zachary was there as well. And Virginia Postrel sees herself in the print magazine, and it's like, oh, like you don't necessarily feel that on the internet. So
Right.
you can kind of reverse engineer from the author's reaction to what a big deal being in print is, and you see yourself in other people's hands.
Yeah.
Like when Dan Wang's book came out, I was on an airplane, and the guy in front of me was reading it in his on his Kindle, and I could tell because it was like something one child policy. I was like, this is Dan Wang's book, and I took a photo, of the guy's Kindle, not the guy, and sent it to Dan, and it felt good for him. It was like, shit, people in United economy class reading my book.
It's a real thing. It exists in the world, and somebody is bothering with it.
But you will see this in people's hands, and you will be like, oh,
exactly.
Mom.
Right. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
It exists in a real world, and people are really engaging in it. And that is a satisfying thing.
Yeah.
That is hard to get out of digital assets.
Yeah.
Well, I think going on that, how important, you talked a little bit about how important libraries are, and we kind of go through these cycles of cancellations throughout history, right? Of actually preserving sort of original texts as they were intended. Because we even saw, like, right after COVID, where children's books were rewritten to be kinder and gentler. And so, how do you sort of think about that, the importance of actually keeping the original as the author intended it, as sort of a time capsule of
Like,
that
should we leave Agatha Christie as racist as she was?
Yeah. I'm actually really glad you asked this question, because it gives me a chance to talk about my daughter. I dedicate the book to Naomi, our littlest reader, I say. And she is. But the great thing, I mean, she's reading, which is awesome. She's 6. But I get to read to her, and that's even better. And she kept on giving me these little kids' books that were not fun to read, and she keeps bringing me to them, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm the adult. I'm the one who theoretically has taste here. Also, this is my head and mouth and everything. I'm going to pick things that I want to read.
Oh, because like too woke? Then you
No. Just
Not interesting.
just not interesting.
Okay.
And right at the same time, I remembered reading this article about how Roald Dahl's books, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and all these others, were being revised.
Really?
And I thought, I better go buy
The old
old editions before they're gone. And so I went and I checked all the dates, and I bought like the full Roald Dahl
I'm
set.
here for the sexist version.
Right.
Yeah.
I want the rude ones, please.
Dr. Seuss too. I think they rewrote a bunch of Dr.
yeah.
Seuss books.
So
years before that, people rewrote Grimm from the 19th century.
Absolutely,
version,
same
which
thing.
was Way more grim.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, I mean the 19th century ones, like the Hansel and Gretel ones, are graphic. They're nasty. There's like
Death.
much more
Not
maiming,
pleasant,
and
fun little story.
and those were rewritten in the 50s.
Yeah, like Hansel
Yeah.
and Gretel were actually eaten.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was for real.
Yeah.
Not
And
symbolic.
and if you don't behave, that's what. Yeah.
The wolf will come and eat
Yeah.
you.
I think that we
I
go.
totally read the old ones, by the way.
Oh,
I'm
well,
like, yeah.
that fits. We go through periods where we are more censorious than others, and there is kind of a virtuousness that we ascribe to ourselves when we do this. It is almost always silly, even when it means well. It honestly, like objectively, is kind of silly, because even if you were able, let's say you're able to purge out of Hemingway or able to purge out of Agatha Christie whatever is offensive in those things, the universe is still full of a million bazillion offensive things.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And all you've actually done is maim the artifact.
Yeah.
Right.
So it would be better to just recognize that, Agatha Christie said the things that she said, and just in your mind,
this is the
as you
Paul
read them,
Graham
just
thing, right? Like he
recognize
has
it.
this wonderful essay about lying to children. Like, why do we lie to children? Why should books lie to children?
That's a fascinating question. I've never considered it.
So what did you end up reading to your daughter?
The worst versions.
Okay.
Yeah, Roald Dahl, and
So
then
The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich.
yes,
start.
I have not done that one yet. What I find though is whatever you pick,
Yeah.
it's great. Kids love it. But there's some part of me that just really objects to the idea that I'm going to read a bowdlerized version, a bowdlerized version of something. And so I would rather her, like, at some point I will read Huckleberry Finn to my daughter, possibly. My daughter is African American. Do I read that to her? I don't know. I think it's a fantastic book.
Yeah.
These are complicated questions.
Yeah.
Like, so I get why we feel the need to be censorious. I also recognize it rarely works out the way that we think it's going to work out.
Well, and I think on that of sort of the importance of books to sort of help build your ethical framework, whether it's something you identify in the book that you don't like and say,
Yes,
this
is
something
a
I don't
super
relate
important
to,
point.
Yeah.
and this is actually, this is really racist and I'm not that
You're
person.
bringing up something that everyone in this room, feel free to weigh in on this because I would love to hear your thinking on it. It seems to me that we went from some kind of frame of reference that a book was a thing that you engaged with to get something out of it that you wanted,
Yeah.
to that you may manipulate or change for your own purposes, to a different model of thinking about the way we interact with the book. Now it feels as though the book, we're like passive recipients to the message that a book offers, and therefore you have no agency of your own to reject the thing that may be offensive in it. To simply say, no, I have a filter. I could deal with that.
But that's downstream from how we see speech, public speech in general. Like to me as a newcomer into the United States, this has always been completely shocking because I can listen to a total asshole who's saying despicable things and I would be like, this is a total asshole who's saying despicable things and let's move on.
Right.
And when we talk about like the moralistic purging of certain content from older books, I'm thinking, okay, so how is this young person going to develop the tools of discernment? Like if they are always given a perfect rendition of the world, I don't see how, like, you read, I don't know, Zola's Nana, and you don't have to be explained that it was really bad to be a prostitute in 19th century Paris. Right. Because you just read the story and you're like, well, this kind of sucks for her, and then she dies, and everybody's really sad, and you don't have to be explained,
right.
you know? And so this like passive recipient morality, and when I read about the defense of the humanities, the defense of fiction reading, it's like, read fiction, says The Atlantic, to like develop your morality. I'm like, that's great, I'm going to develop my morality through a great book, but that's not why we read it.
The point of
we read it for developing empathy, which is to develop as a human being, because human beings have empathy.
The point of it is to go into this experience that the author is inviting you into, in which they will share things about the human experience that you cannot get on your own, because our lives are simply too small. Like, I mean, I live in Franklin, Tennessee. I don't live in Manhattan. I cannot see the world the way you see the world. I cannot see the world the way you see the world. Like, I literally just have the lens that I have. I am a 1 month away, 50-year-old white man. I will never see the world the way my own children see the world, because that's not accessible to me. I literally need other people to help present me models of the world through their experiences that I can have access to. And so that is what a book allows you to do. And the minute you begin to manipulate that in ways that the author did not intend, you're subverting what the author was trying to do in shaping a particular kind of experience.
I was recently, I'm not going to name names, but there is this fantastic female writer who is now in her 80s and, you know, has been writing phenomenal books in the past many decades. And a friend of mine was working on the editing of the new book, or like an anthology where she like provided a text for, and she saw the Google Doc where they were editing her. And first of all, it felt extremely sacrilegious to her that there is this intellectual giant and these like 27-year-old American publishing girls were like editing her, and one of the constant additions were like, you can't say woman when you're talking about the 1960s of your own country where she's from. You have to say like women and people identifying as women or something.
Oh my gosh.
And eventually, but she's a very enlightened person, and she like changed it, and not as a way to like be servile here, but she was like, okay, if like this is how people think and speak, this, okay, let's update.
I'll figure it out, right.
But now in this text that is about a completely different continent, language, cultural environment, where nobody would have ever said this at the time,
right.
They are kind of injecting this extremely modern notion in a way where they kind of shamed her into it, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know if like that's what we want to do with authors.
I think that
like you can't write your own memoirs about your own life.
The woke, unwoke, overwoke thing is so fraught that even uttering the words, I feel like I'm getting ready to like fall into a vat of something. We've just made it not safe for people to express ideas.
Yeah.
And that is not good.
Yeah.
Because let's say you genuinely do believe something hateful.
Yeah.
I would actually rather know that you believe something hateful than you keep it to yourself and operate under that hatred behind my back.
Yeah.
Like that's far more frightening to me than I just recognize, oh, you're a bigot.
Yeah.
I know people
and it's so
that are like
fun sometimes. Like I always say, like, you know, we have a huge group chat where we always argue who is sexist. And like my American friends think that Kundera was sexist. I love Kundera. I mean, I don't agree with him, but like it's great that somebody writes this stuff down. And actually you can also learn a little bit as a woman from Kundera, because his framing is very much like a very like sexualizing way of looking at women. Like I want to know, I know what I think, I don't know what you think. I think that Norman Rush is a sexist, which my friends think is just a great writer, and I'm like, I literally like want to like smash the book into the wall every time I read it. And one of my core arguments there is that I always get super mad at Hemingway because I think he is super misogynistic, and clearly like Maria was just the only young woman on that fucking mountain, and it has nothing to do with anti-fascism. It's like there was nobody else, and we should just like own up to this fact.
Yeah.
And like Henry Miller for me is fun. I'm like, oh, you know, he gave his wife gonorrhea, you know, like it's so fun, you know. But because it's open.
That's so fun for his wife.
Yeah, but it's fun in the artistic sense. Like you want a little bit of cockiness in art, because I can then be happy, like, oh, well, my life is great, you know, like, I'm going to this. It's fine. It's much better than this, like, hiding it in the seams, and I think this is what we're forcing people to do.
Yeah, well, okay, so here's the harder case.
Tell me.
You just described a scenario where you have all the agency you need to toss a book across the room if you want to and go pick up another one.
Yeah, I did not actually, like, tear apart Norman Rush's book, but that's just because, as a Jew, I just can't read books.
So... I appreciate your restraint. I would say
it's my self-restraint.
If you owned the book, I don't even know that I would entirely hold it against you if you just felt the urge, because it would be like, it's your property. You can do with it what you want. However, here's a scenario that's not the case. Mm-hmm. You're a public school student, and your teacher assigns the entire class a book that is, by whatever measure, by whatever standard, somehow offensive.
Okay.
How do we handle that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe the core thing. Is like if you're always optimizing for maybe this will offend someone, then you can't write anything, basically.
But it's such a different... philosophically, it's so interesting because at my university, they wanted us to be mad. Mm-hmm. We were constantly given texts, and then they would see like, okay, but how are you mad? And then we all learned from it.
Sure.
Okay, because it was called the liberal arts, so you had to be liberal.
For whatever reason, if you think about Alice Walker's The Color Purple.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, you talked about that now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that book comes out, I think, in 1982. Mm-hmm. And it's published and it's immediately opposed by a parent in Oakland, California, down the road from where I grew up, because there's a lot of offensive stuff. I mean, what's offensive? It depends on who you ask. In her case, the mother who was protesting on behalf of her daughter, there was sexualized content in the book. It was seen as anti-religious and a few other things like that. Meanwhile...
Because it is sexualized and anti-religious, the whole point of the book.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually the anti-religious thing is a little more complicated than that. I think it's kind of like
because she's writing letters to God.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and her sister in the book actually is a missionary who is like maintains her faith throughout the entire story and is actually something of a hero in the story.
There's a questioning.
Yes, there's a theodicy happening in that book, and it doesn't fall down in the way like a religious conservative would like it to fall down.
Okay. Oh, maybe maybe that was the problem, right? She thought it would be more religious, and then it was just gay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
That happens a lot.
The issue is this like obsession of revision of the original.
Yeah.
Okay. How could, let's say, 19th century any writer cannot be a sexist for 21st century standards?
We will be seen, like I always tell people, like in 100 years, even the most like LSD liberated Northern Californian yoga teacher will be seen as a total barbarian, sexist, racist person, and they will be like editing her whatever she wrote.
Just keeping her writing as is, that's the whole point. And yet you have a right to not like it, and then maybe you can write your own book criticizing that, and then we can...
But that's also good. Like, I want people in 100 years to be more evolved than I am.
Right.
Oh, yes,
like, you want to be the barbarian.
It is kind of an amusing arrogance to think that it's done with me.
We're done with you.
Yeah, that's all there needed to be.
Well, and I think to your question, like, it's the right to not be offended, right?
Yeah.
Is it that, or is it that actually we should be offended, and the whole point is to talk about the things that offend us and why?
I think that's how
different people might be offended in different ways.
Yeah.
How did we even get to the idea of the right of not being offended? Like, where did that come from?
Somebody should write a book about it.
Furniture order catalogs, like customize this sofa, and then people just like
if you think about the rise of expressive individualism, there's a negotiation that happens between people when I confess or stress my identity, which is that I can do that, but I need you in some form or fashion to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And otherwise it's kind of like, is it true? I mean, I say it's true, but unless you validate it, I don't know if it's true. And we as a culture
it's like startup valuations.
Yes.
We need the first check.
Right. I actually don't care what you think the evaluation is. I will do the valuation. The challenge is that if you're constantly seeking the validation of other people, we have basically created a scenario where everything has to be validated. And that means if I object to something, my objections have to be validated. And that's like, I mean, to your point, there's no end to that. Like, you'll never win. It would be better to just say, everything is going to offend you at some point or another. Just get used to it. Like, that's the nature of being a human. And there's nothing wrong with being offended. You can literally just go to the other room if you're offended.
One extreme, it's like when someone writes about the objectively racist situation going on, and someone said, like, let's say it's an article, something really bad happened, racism, and someone says, you can't say that, but the reporter did it, but that's what it actually happened.
Right.
Like, but the other person's like, but that offended me. You using word N-word in your article, you can't do that, but that's what happened.
Yeah, I'm describing reality.
Yeah.
But that also a little bit goes back to a lot of the AI kind of the stuff that is being really contested, which is, are we going to create an AI, whether that's for literary purposes or general like daily use, that is an idealized version of humanity, right? Are we putting these like censorious instincts into this tool, or is it just going to be positive description of the world, which is like how we are?
That would be too nice, and I don't imagine that it will go as nicely as that.
Yeah.
Nothing ever does.
Yeah.
There's like a recent article that compared the different LLMs of sort of where they were on sort of the spectrum and what was acceptable and what wasn't. And
very
like,
interesting.
Grok did the best.
Yeah, Grok versus.
And then and then you had
ChatGPT.
like, I forget, very sanitized Anthropic and chat. And so I think one advantage human authors will have is that they will not be limited by the constraints of, we cannot say certain words of the way that these things are
Another
programmed.
wonderful sort of moat that humans have, and I'm talking about moats as if AI were an actual threat. I don't think that's the case. I think humans create tools and we figure out how to use tools. But there are things that are uniquely human. And the things that are uniquely human, it's worth elevating them and celebrating them and looking for ways of amplifying those. And one of those things is when you ask an LLM to write something for you, it will give you the most milquetoast version of an idea that's possible. It's like, what is the lowest common denominator of how this idea could be expressed?
Decision by committee, always.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the great thing about a human is, you could be talking about a meeting in a business context and think of a swallow. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you have an analogy that you want to use. And then you could, go quote, I don't know, Henri Bergson or something.
Yeah.
Nobody would do that but you, because you happen to have this random synapses that went that direction, and you pulled that up. The AI will never do that. Yeah. And that's what ends up creating delight for a reader is when they encounter things like that.
Yeah. My concern about AI is actually on the opposite side of that, other than getting just vanilla answer for everyone, but the one extreme version of extremely tailored content creation.
Yes.
So I noticed my ChatGPT gives me more precise answer catered to my need. I mean, yes, which helps me at the moment, but
you're you're losing the friction.
Yeah, we're losing friction more and more. And certain point, I mean, I'm actually seeing this in my real life, like YouTube music. YouTube music algorithm knows my tastes than my cognition does. Yeah, YouTube music recommends this music. I think you're gonna like this. I'm like, hell no, and I try it, but I'm like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, my brain likes it.
You even see it in the demographic, right? Like online dating basically is pushing people very similar already together.
And it seems like we're almost reaching at the point with just even minimum input, then AI is gonna create this loop of continuously just hooking back into that. And my concern / question is, where does a book fit in that feedback loop? Because at a certain point, if you don't actually leave internet and grab book, majority of people will just be in that your own media consumption loop. Just completely.
That's interesting. I mean, the book is very high friction, right? You have to spend time with it.
And it's going to feel like extraordinarily high friction activity to go to a bookstore or even order physical book online.
I think that there's a lot of truth in that. And I also think that there are parallels that we can draw that are maybe helpful in rethinking the problem itself. So it used to be that human beings were all svelte little creatures because there were no calories available. And so we did not have obesity because you just literally couldn't eat enough. We got really good in the modern West at developing lots of excess calories. And as a result, we are often overweight and have all kinds of other issues. Okay. We also don't do anything with our bodies anymore because we don't need to. We sit at computers and we fulfill a lot of our economic functions in sedentary ways.
And then pay a lot of money to go to the gym.
So the gym is exactly the angle, because the gym is a ton of friction.
Yeah.
Logging crap into MyFitnessPal, I don't care how simple they make it, is a ton of friction, and you're probably only going to do it actually about 29 days, and then you're going to quit anyway. And all of these things that we do to improve our own self are high friction because they don't come naturally. They don't come as easy as simply going with whatever the flow is. It is much easier to just continue to sit at the computer and dip your hand into the bowl of M&Ms than it is to go take the call on the walk out front. But it turns out that taking the call on the walk out front is actually really not that hard. And it's actually really satisfying. And if you do it 2 or 3 times, you're like, why do I ever sit in front of a Zoom screen when I could actually just do all my calls like this way? And then if they're your direct reports, you even have the trump card that is, you could say, hey, would you keep notes for this? So you can basically go for a walk You're going to get 15,000 steps in a day. You're going to feel amazing. You're going to get the sun on your face. And it's actually not that high friction. It's low friction. And a book is like that too. If we think it's high friction, maybe it feels high friction. But the truth is, if you pick up a Raymond Carver novel that just so happens to be the kind of thing that you like to read, you're like 30 pages in before you know what's happened. And then you close it and you go to bed and you wake up the next morning and you're going to do it again. Yeah. You're going to pour your coffee and you're going to actually get another 30 pages in before you figure out how to put your day together. Yeah. And you don't start doing that enough, and that's just as efficacious for you as working out. And it turns out that it's not hard, it's fun.
It's fun.
I mean, my brain just went a bit haywire and just thought of like coming up with this library bros culture. Like, bros.
Oh my God, yes. Absolutely. Before we wrap up, I find that the story of how this book came to exist is actually a story of friction as well, but it also says a lot about how we see reading in 2025. Do you maybe just want to say a few closing words about the journey of getting this book published and the maybe a little bit unexpected hurdles that you encountered? I mean, the book itself, it's so hard to imagine that this didn't used to exist. Yeah. Because first of all, it's extremely dense in a scholarly way, and every paragraph is useful and it needs to exist. Yeah. But it wasn't an obvious thing. It was not. It feels so inevitable now, but even months ago it wasn't. Like something could have gone wrong. Yeah. In fact, it didn't feel real to me until it literally was on my doorstep, and even then it didn't quite feel real. It was really odd. I started off writing a book about individualism in 2010, and I came up with the best theory to explain the rise of modern Western individualism that anyone had ever heard. And it just didn't matter, because every time I sent it out through my agent to publishers, the 2 rounds that I did, I got rejection letters. Oh my God. Lots of them, like 50 in all or something. What was their problem? They just said nobody cares about individualism. And I thought, are you freaking kidding me? Talk about the contempt of the familiar. Right. When was this? 2010. 2010. Try again. I think try again. No, maybe. 2010, 2012, in that window. Okay. Just slap Jesus on it and it was Well, actually, I had a version of it that it was called Any Jesus You Please. Oh!
I think now's the time.
I mean, that's a great title, right?
It's such a good title. Okay.
I'm glad for the validation, at least. Anyway, I got no's. And so, but I did get, over the course of those 2 years, I got 2 editors that responded to 1 chapter in the book, and they said, that's kind of interesting. We'd like to see more about that. Oh. And that happened to be a chapter on the Reformation. And the chapter title was called Men with Books. Because my argument was... That's my type. Totally. My argument was that in this rise of individualism, that there was a moment in which the technology of the book met this particular religious controversy in a way that produced a new understanding of the world. And literally it wouldn't have happened without the printing press. It had started other times. Like the same insights that Luther had were pioneered by other people, and they just got executed. Nothing happened. Sorry. Right. But Luther flooded Europe with books. Yeah. And then people responded by flooding Europe with more books. It was a whole bookish thing. He even started with the text, right? Right, correct. The 95 Theses. Yeah. So I said, I could absolutely write that book. If you want me to write a whole book on that, that would be so much fun. I could absolutely do that. And I immediately began thinking, all right, I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to I'm going to tell the story like this. I had it all in my head. I told my agent, I was like, this is actually good news, because this book would be even more fun to write. Yeah. And the truth is, I can knock it out in a couple years. And this was 15 years ago? 13 years later, I finally was done. And in 2023, I really began to, it all kind of gelled, the big argument gelled in 2019. I was wandering in the wilderness for all those years till 2019. I finally, the argument gelled. I knew what I wanted to say. And then it just took me quite a while to learn the data, to learn the the literature such that I could even tell the story that I was thinking I wanted to tell. I did that. I started to put chapters together. I put a new proposal together. I went back out to the market. I got a bunch of no's again. And then I was like talking to my friend about it, Jeff Goins, who's he has an agency called Fresh Complaint, and they write books for people. And I was like, dude, I'm so flipping pissed off. Like, I cannot figure out how to make this thing work. If I were the editor, which I used to be, so I was sitting on the other side of the desk, I would sign this book in a minute, which is stupid to think about, actually, because you're like, of course you would. It's your idea. You're like, you can't even filter this. They're not seeing it. Somehow or another, what they see in the proposal is not what you see in your own mind. So I've done a bad job communicating it. And Jeff was telling me this, and he went and he said, let me just look at the proposal. And so he did. He went through it, and he was like, yeah, see, you need to do this and this. And he started just like coaching me through my own proposal. And like, I literally spent, years and years and years doing nothing but doing what he was doing. And I couldn't see it in my own work. And the end result was I retooled the proposal. I went back out, and I got a yes, like right off the bat.
Amazing.
It was like I just needed to use the right bait. Like the fisherman who's like, nothing's working. It's like, well, that's because you're using the wrong thing. Well, that's what happened. And so my editor at Prometheus, Jake Bonner, he reacted immediately. It's like he got it instantly, and it was super encouraging. And actually, the book even took the shape that it did in part because of work that I did with him. So
that's amazing. And it's so funny that during this conversation we heard the heating, because James Burke's, I don't know if you guys know his TV series in the 80s, Connections. And there's a Connections book that's wonderful about how different technological innovations make each other come to existence. And his big argument about reading and books is that they come from the invention of the fireplace. Because in the long houses, you were like, everybody was sleeping in the same space around the central fire. And with the advent of the chimney and the fireplace, people actually started sleeping separately. And like the whole idea of the bedroom came to existence in Europe, privacy. And then next thing you know, girl is like, I'm still up.
As my daughter does with a flashlight to this day.
Oh, I love that. Another way of how books survive technological changes. Joel Miller, thank you so much for joining us. What an incredible book and conversation, and thank you so much for the great questions. If you want to stick around a little bit. Oh, they just left the drinks here. I'm not going to say anything. Thank you so much, and congratulations. And tell your friends about this book and buy it for teenagers and young people for Christmas.
First off, Anna, thank you so much.
Thank you so
and then
much.
Everyone, thank you so much. You gave up an entire evening to listen to this.
We gained an
to
evening.
contribute to it, and I'm super grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.